This is going to be another series of video in my Ranking the Album series, and today I'm going to tackle the discography of Van Halen. Now, we lost Eddie Van Halen, unfortunately, in 2020, but I've always been a big fan of Van Halen's work all the way back to my middle school days, so I am going to tackle all 12 of their studio albums, and I'm going to start with the one that I consider my least favorite, Van Halen 3. What a piece of crap album this is. Now, I promise you, I have tried to give this album a chance. I've listened to it over and over. I've really tried to find any redeeming quality in this album, and I just can't. I mean, you got songs like The One I Want, Pizza Man, Boogie Man. Like, it's just, it's such a mismatch. I hate Without You. I hate Ballot or the Bullet. I hate How Many Say I mean, there's just so many things to hate about this album, and I really tried to give it a fair shake, and I just can't. I cannot enjoy this album. Nothing against Gary Sharon. It's just, for whatever reason, none of it works, and it just sounds just too crowded and awkward, and just the songs themselves are just poorly written, and the whole thing's crap. Number 11, OU812, another album that I just can't get into. I love 5150, I do, I love it, but for whatever reason, I just have never warmed to OU812. I do like Finish What You Started and When It's Love, but to me, the rest of it is just forgettable. None of it's terribly melodic. The songs just don't stick with you. It's just a weak album, and it's such a disappointment after the triumph that was 5150. So, gotta rank that one really low. I'm sorry. Next one, number 10, Balance. The albums here and above, Van Halen 3 was a bad album. OU812 was mediocre, but really, the albums from here on up, they're not, just because they're low on my list does not mean I don't like them or they're bad albums, but at some point they gotta fall in a certain order. That's what's the real challenge about making a list like this. And for me, I like Balance a lot. I think there's a lot of great Eddie Van Halen, creative guitar playing moments. There's stuff that harkens back to, the classic Van Halen. I think Sammy Hagar obviously sounds really well on here. It's just, parts of it sound too loud, parts of it sound too cluttered, a little too much for the ears. And I'm not saying it's a bad album. I do enjoy listening to the album. My favorite tracks on here are Amsterdam, Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do. I like Aftershock a lot. It's just, when I consider all the albums in my top 10, Balance just falls near the bottom. And maybe it's just because I haven't spent as much time with that album as I have the other albums on this list, but I promise I'm not trying to knock Balance. It's just, the other Sammy albums, the other David Lee Roth albums, to me, are just a notch better. Number 9, I'm going to go with Diver Down. And the knock against this album has always been there's too many cover versions on here. You got Dancing on the Street, Where Have All the Good Times Gone, Pretty Woman, Happy Trails, if you want to consider that a song. But I think the Van Halen compositions on here are really strong. And I know some of them are retreads, some of them are songs that date back to the first album. But I like Secrets a lot. There's a charm in Big Bad Bill, Sweet William Now. Is it enough to make this a great album? No. I do like Little Guitars a lot. I like the cover of Pretty Woman, I think is pretty good. Even Dancing in the Street, I think is all right. Not Van Halen at their best, but I think The Full Bug is just a tremendous Van Halen rocker. So I think I'm a little more forgiving of Diver Down than some other people are. And, in high school, I listened to that album to death. That in 1984, had those on cassette, and you know, that was when Van Halen could do no wrong. Van Halen was the best band in the world. But in retrospect, yeah, it's not as good as the other David Lee Roth albums. Number 8, A Different Kind of Truth. Love that album. Really such a return to form. David Lee Roth is back in the studio with the band, finally. They kick ass on this album. They really, at times, sound like the best moments of Van Halen from the 70s. It was so refreshing to hear this album and just how awesome it was. And I know David Lee Roth is not singing like he was in the 70s or even the 80s. But, I mean, come on, at a certain point, the expectations have to be lowered. I mean, nobody can sound, even Paul Stanley, you know, as he's aged, and he takes care of his voice, it's still, just at a certain point, you can't sing like you used to. But, you know, considering that, I think that this is a fantastic Van Halen album. Number 7, Van Halen 2. The follow-up to their brilliant debut album. Got some really great moments on here. I love Beautiful Girls is a great track. I like You're No Good, Somebody Get Me a Doctor. Just, you know, a great lineup of tracks. Just not as great as, you know, DOA is cool. Just not as great as the first album. And there was bound to be a sophomore slump. I mean, there's no way that you're going to be able to match what they came with right out of the gate. But, you know, Van Halen 2 is still a really good album. Number 6 for Unlawful, Kernel, Knowledge. I like this album a lot, too. I do. I like, you know, obviously, Pound Cake is a great song on here. Right Now is a great track. Top of the World. You know, it was finally, after, for me, the disappointment of OU812, it was nice to see Van Halen back in top form, just as good as they were on 5150. For Unlawful, Kernel, Knowledge is a great album. I wish I could rank it higher. I really do, but I grew up with the David Lee Roth stuff. That was when I was in grade school and in high school, and the Sammy Hagar years, except for 5150. I was in college. I was getting into different styles of music, newer music that was coming out. And so I just don't have the attachment for Unlawful, Kernel, Knowledge that I do some of the other albums. So, but, you know, again, I hate that I have to rank it so low, but just the albums that come before it just have more, they resonate more with me, and I connect more with those albums. But FUCK is still a great album. Number 5, 1984. This was, you know, when I'm in high school, and just such a great album with Panama. You got the Jump, which was a lot more synthy than anything Van Halen had done before. I love, obviously, Hot for Teacher. I'll Wait was a great single off this album. Drop Dead Legs, House of Pain was great. Top Jimmy. I mean, so many great tracks on here, and people will knock it because there's too much synthesizer, and that doesn't bother me. I think 1984 is still a fantastic album, and you can fight me about it. Number 4, 5150, great album all the way through. They showed that they could still continue on and not lose a beat with a brand new singer. I mean, he wasn't a brand new singer, but to Van Halen, he was a new singer. But just all the great tracks. Why Can't This Be Love was great. Dreams was fantastic. Get Up was a great rocker. Best of Both Worlds. It seems like on every album, Van Halen has to have some kind of goofball, odd, you know, which is on the inside song is sort of that, goofy, we're Van Halen, we get silly. That's the only weak track on the album for me. Number 3, Women and Children First. Love this one to death. And The Cradle Will Rock is just a great album opener. And then you've got Everybody Wants Some, Fools, Romeo Delight, Loss of Control is just a great frenetic rocker. Take Your Whiskey Home is a great bluesy. David Lee Roth does great with that track. Could This Be Magic is kind of that quirky, like I say, an oddball track on every Van Halen album. That's kind of the goofy one on this album. And A Simple Rhyme is a great way to close out that album. So just really fantastic guitar work, fantastic songwriting. David Lee Roth has never sounded better. Just a great, great album. Number 2, Fair Warning. Another fantastic 70s album from Van Halen. I mean, Mean Street with great guitar work, Center Swing, Unchained, maybe one of my favorite Van Halen tracks of all time. You got Push Comes to Shove, So This Is Love, Sunday Afternoon in the Park, a little disco beat going there on your Van Halen album that you didn't expect. And One Foot Out the Door is a great way to close out that album. But I love the artwork on here. I love the track selection, just everything about it. It's just the album above this. I just can't rank anything above it. And of course, my number 1 album is Van Halen's debut album, So Good. Maybe the best debut album of all time. And if you don't think so, then I'd love to hear your argument for what is better. Just Running with the Devil, Ain't Talking About Love, Eruption, Are You Kidding Me? Ice Cream Man, Atomic Punk, Little Dreamer, I'm the One, On Fire, Jamie's Crying, You Really Got Me. I mean, you're going to argue with that track listing. It's still, for me, it sent shockwaves throughout the entire hard rock community when this album came out. Nobody had heard anything like it before, and it influenced so many bands that came afterwards. Just a great album. I have to go with the first Van Halen album as my number 1. This was a tough list to complete because there's so much great Van Halen albums, and I know not everybody's going to agree with it, but that's the great thing about these lists is everybody's got a different reason why they rank their albums like they do, but this is my list for Van Halen. And as always, leave a comment. I'd love to know what your ranking is. And as always, take care and Happy New Year.